Welcome back. This presentation is focused on how to transition from a freshly cut log to a bowl blank ready to receive an attractive design. To be clear, all of our carving starts with logs we believe contain interesting wood, and only when we face the wood can we select a shape that we believe illustrates the stories within the wood. We call this following the wood. To follow the wood means that our preparation of bowl blanks is intended to permit this flexible path. This installment in this series is focused on the generalizable issues that pertain to most bowls. So let's move from this scene to the logs. Finding interesting wood is our treasure hunt, and we have friends and relatives that keep their eyes open for down trees that may fit our interests. This tree came down at a local golf course in a violent storm, and a friend on a golf outing saw it and gave me a call. The groundskeeper was happy to see the wood go to good use, so we were on. As you can see, we will end up with logs of different sizes that will need to begin their process of being cut into blanks that can become attractive bowls and trays. Note that the first step in lathe turners is similarly to convert sections of a tree into a uniform bowl blank that they can safely mount on their lathe. Generally, preparing a wet bowl blank for a lathe and for carving will be similar. Before getting to how we convert interesting logs to bowl blanks, let me step back and present a couple of other important background items related to safety and to wood protection. This photo illustrates some of the key items I use for the safety of myself and my tools. Starting on the left are some sturdy leather gloves whose purpose is obvious. They're overlapping with my carving smock. When wet carving using a high-powered angle grinder, the aggressive carving head will be turning at 8 to 12,000 RPM. That means I'm creating chips that are flying off at over 100 miles per hour. Without an impact barrier, these can be both quite painful, and the wet wood will stain whatever it is you're wearing. You can see the primary impact zone there on the smock. Moving to the right, at the front are three additional items with their own obvious purpose. First is my dust mask, rated at N95, hearing protection and face protection. The N95 mask is a dust mask with an exit port which is much cooler than medical types. In the back are two tools with their own protection. The issue is that carving produces a lot of flying material of virtually all sizes. The larger ones will clog air input ports on the tool, which are needed to keep the tool cool. The really fine particles will enter the tool and clog the well-oiled motor and destroy the motor. My solution is to use knee-high stockings and put them on the barrel of the tool. They will capture the vast majority of material that would clog the tool, but still be porous enough to sustain the necessary airflow through the tool. This hack has proven to be a great way to extend the life of the tools. Finally, I want to point out two features of the large angle grinder. It has a blade guard to ensure that if it gets away from you, the blade is covered in the directions the tool will travel. I have a friend that had a guard installed incorrectly and did serious damage to himself. Additionally, this tool has a paddle switch that will shut off the tool if not depressed. For a really aggressive carving tool, this is an important safety item. In this photo are three sets of items that will be referenced in this series. The can of Anchor Seal is a paraffin-based paint designed to be applied to the ends of newly cut logs, vastly slowing down the water loss from the log's end grain. The goal is to apply this immediately after the log is cut to minimize cracking or checking of the ends if caused by water rapidly executing from that end grain. Second is a pair of our bottles of cyanoacrylate glue, also called CA glue. These come in many viscosities, and we buy the larger bottles to refill the small ones. Thin CA glue is used to stabilize repair cracks, small zones of embedded bark on sawdust placed in medium-sized voids as a filler or a localized rot. Medium CA glue is excellent for filling small holes in voids, such as left by bugs. For much more extensive rot, in a piece of wood that's too valuable to discard, we use a two-step epoxy sequence, but this is a more involved process. I'm not showing them here. Finally is a caliper we use for measuring wall thickness in bowls. Here's one approach I've used which is unique to carvers because it skips the step of making a bowl blank. It was a good experiment, and I was able to get 6 reasonable bowls from the single 26-inch log, but it constrains the design process, and cutting out bowls required some interesting chainsaw work. Therefore, my preference is to cut the log into key blocks first, and then convert them into design-ready bowl blanks. That's the focus of this presentation, so let's get started. The goal of cutting out your block from a log is to minimize work later for flattening and making parallel. Milling is an obvious approach if you have an Alaska mill or access to something larger. In the absence of a milling option, simply cutting as straight a line as possible with your chainsaw is the next choice. For this, a very sharp chain is important to minimize any drift. Once I select what features I want to capture from the log, I then orient the log so that my cuts will be vertical, and then I draw lines where I want to cut using a level to ensure that my lines are parallel on both the surface facing me and the log's opposite end. I will generally either start cutting through the pith, or in this case, cutting it out. Because the area around the pith is where the log will have the greatest dimensional change when drying, the pith is where splitting is most likely, so that when flattening and leveling, I will further trim away the area near the pith to minimize the cracking risk. Sometimes, making methodical vertical cuts are not practical. For those where my raw chunks are far from ready to flatten and level, I use this homemade device to hold the logs in large chunks to keep them firmly in place. Then, exactly as shown on the prior full log, I draw my cut lines using a level and measuring the distances between my cuts on both ends of the log. With the odd-shaped log held safely, I can accurately make the cuts with a sharp chain. Starting with your chunk of wood newly cut from your log, there will likely be a host of issues, including deep chainsaw grooves, and the tops and bottoms are unlikely to be either truly flat nor parallel to each other. Note that our bowl blanks are different from those made by lathe turners. Lathe turners do not need to be as fastidious about the tops and bottoms of their blanks being flat and parallel. Their blocks will be first made approximately round on a bandsaw and then mounted to the lathe, often twice, first to a faceplate and then later to a chuck after a tenon has been formed. The rounded block is then turned to make the bowl's final tops and bottoms. We skip those steps as the top and bottom of our bowl blank will be the actual top and bottom of the surfaces of the resulting bowl. The bowl will then be trimmed out of the carved block. By far, the easiest approach for making the tops and bottoms truly flat and parallel is the thickness planer. It will require your chunk to be the right size and that it is moderately close to having parallel tops and bottoms. It's not cheating to do some modest amount of carving off of very high and irregular spots first to make the thickness planer's job easier. Our planer is limited to about 12.5 inches wide, so anything wider than that is ineligible. For those chunks below that size, in only a few minutes, I can end up with a pair of truly flat and parallel surfaces ready to receive my design. For what I do, the majority of my chunks require hand flattening and careful work to make parallel. For this, I use my carving tool to remove clearly high zones and bring the surfaces down to erase deeper cuts that have been introduced by chainsawing. Finally, I switch to a powered hand planer, moving in a pattern of diagonals and perpendicular motions to create a flat surface. Once the top is flat, I then need to turn over the chunk and repeat this on the other side. Then, as before, I carve off high points and then hand plane to a uniform surface using complementary carving motions to get the smooth surface that I seek. I'm done when I measured that the distance from the flat top to my newly flat bottom were the same distance from each other. At this point, I'm now ready to begin the design process using design techniques that will be demonstrated in the next set of presentations in this series. I'll see you there in Chapter 3.